in the RVing, we were also kind of sampling different parts of the country and really living there like locals, right? So some places we'd pass through. I think we've been to 30 some odd states now, but some places we'd stay. We might stay for a week, might stay for a month, and we were very, very good at living like locals. Like we didn't look up the tourist sort of destinations, although we did some of that. And more so wanted to be like, where do locals hang out? What's the coffee shops feel like? You know, that sort of thing. And for me, again, Florida boy in Iowa, I couldn't take the snow and cold, but more than that, I just couldn't take the gray. Like I really needed some sun. Yeah. And I realized like, oh, seasonal depression, that's not for sissies. Like that's a real thing. And it's incredibly bad, right? And so in our samplings, we landed on Southern California for obvious reasons. It's beautiful. And we started staying there longer and longer. And so every winter we'd stay, for a month to 3 months to 6 months, and realize like, gosh, we got to, it's time for us to move. Like this is a life-giving place. And what's cool about us being able to sample it is we got to see kind of how the kids were doing and if they thrive there or not. And it was very, very clear that it suited their souls as well. All love the water and all love the sunshine, right? I think all of us like both those things. Yeah. And so there was always that concern though, right? Like me as being leader, head of the household, whatever you want to call it, I was concerned that, man, is this the moment where they're going to look back and be like, this is when dad screwed it all up. And so that was definitely in the back of my mind. But selling the house, moving out, we rented for a while, just as sort of like an MVP thing, right? Minimum viable product. And realized like the kids were just continuing to thrive and make friends. And because we're homeschoolers, there's a much larger homeschool contingent there. Pre-COVID, now post-COVID, it's massive. But even before that, it was much larger. And just creating options for the kids, skateboarding, horseback riding, like a lot of things that you could do year-round there. And then building friendships. And so it's been life-giving. It's been incredible. It's not been easy. I mean, real estate there, as you know, is quite a bit different than Iowa. The house that I bought in Iowa wouldn't even qualify as a down payment for the house that we bought in California. But yeah, it's been cool.
Has it gone up in value since you bought it?
The house?
Yeah.
Yes,
yeah.
a lot.
Yeah. And that could have gone the opposite way, of course. But
yes.
One of the arguments we make all the time in real estate is like, if you can afford it, this is something I didn't know when I was younger. So I used to try to find the cheapest house I could. Like when I got started in real estate, buy the cheapest house. So I was so proud of my $80,000 house that I fixed up, and now it's worth $100 or it was worth $120 when I got done with it. And I was like, yeah, I'm living for $400 a month. This is great. Which again, it was important because I needed to be able to pay bills, and I'm not saying somebody go out and buy something they can't afford. But property values have doubled in that area now. More than doubled, really probably tripled. So that house that was maybe worth $120 today is probably worth $360, maybe $400.
Wow.
Good, that's great. Now I wish I wouldn't have sold it, but I did. But had I bought the $1 million house then, and it tripled, it'd be worth $3 million. So if I could afford, and then if you're putting a small down payment, let's say 3.5% on $1 million house is, what is that, 35 grand? Mm-hmm. Versus on a $100,000 house, you're putting $3,500 down. So the difference of $25,000, let's call it $30,000 of down payment. But then if you extrapolate that out over doubling or tripling of a property value over time, it's millions of dollars. So today it's almost like I would love to help people find, how do you buy the most expensive house possible, but do so in a way that you can easily afford, which is why we love house hacking, why I love this house in Maui, which is, I can rent out 2 of the units here and live on the third for free. Mm-hmm. So I'm not doing the stupid thing where I'm, can't afford my payment, but I'm also getting the value of owning a $2 million house that's now worth $4 million. In 5 years. And real estate's wild like that.
It is.
Yeah, were you going through, you had a lot of, I don't know, I'll say fear is the wrong word maybe, but trepidation about buying that house?
No, it's the right word.
Okay. So how did you talk yourself into buying this expensive house in Southern California?
Yeah. It's a unique story, maybe not for everybody, but we were lamenting about real estate in the area that we wanted to be in, and we're like, man, we can't afford to live in this neighborhood. Long story short, an off-market deal, undervalue, fell into our lap by a good friend of ours. He's like, I just don't want you guys to leave the neighborhood. And I thought he had just drank too much whiskey that night. I'm like, man, no way. And so we were able to buy it under market value during the peak of the market, got to lock in at the lowest rate. Near the bottom, and so it was beautiful timing, man, and very clear that that was the place we were supposed to be.
Yeah.
And what solidified it is I ran it past a good friend of mine that's a realtor, and we were sitting at the coffee shop, and he looked at me, he goes, "How much?" I told him, he goes, "You might be the stupidest person I've ever met if you don't buy this house." He's like, "Sell one of your kids, do whatever you need to do." Of course he's kidding, but and so we did.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, a lot of fear, man. I mean, real estate there is it's incomprehensible.
Yeah.
The only person that would that I've met that was like, "Oh, it's pretty affordable here," is our mutual friend Steve Chu. So
Yeah.
I remember meeting Steve in Laguna. He's like, "How much are houses here?" This was like 5 years ago, and I told him, he's like, "It's not bad. It seems fair."
Yeah.
And I'm like, "You're the only guy I've ever talked to," and it's only because he's in San Francisco,
Yes.
right?
Yeah. I would say that about living in Hawaii now. Every place in America is on sale. No matter where I go, I'm like, whoa, you can buy a house for $2 million here. This is crazy. Like, everything is cheap everywhere for the rest of my life.
Totally.
Because everything's so expensive here.
This is brainwashing, man.
Yeah. It's so... and this is maybe a picture for life in a lot of areas, is so much of fear is based on comparison, not based on actual evidence of being fearful or not, worthy of fear, right? Like, we're afraid of the $1 million house because we're used to the $100,000 house. Even though the $1 million house might rent for way more, it may have other ways to, you can afford it just fine. Like, the fear may be completely unjustified, but it's compared to other things. And so there's magic in there. There's a keynote speech in there somewhere about scaring yourself into doing something.
Well, one of the things you've said to me several times, Brandon, is stop saying you can't and ask yourself how, right? And that may be not all exactly the words that you said.
That's exactly what I say.
Yeah,
that's all I say.
I thought
I just stole that from Rich Dad Poor Dad. So all of my best.
But they're
advice.
good words, man. And so instead of just forget about the number.
Yeah.
For a minute.
Yeah.
And how it compares to everything else that you're used to, and just ask yourself how. Like, how could I make this work?
Yeah.
And then maybe you can't, but at least you went through that exercise instead of having the emotional knee-jerk response of just saying I can't do it and walking away.
Yeah.